Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, this is Deema of Getsett. You're listening to the new Warehouse Podcast. Here's today's safety tip. Make sure you check your trailer floor. Make sure it's in good condition before you drive your forklift onto it.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I will be joined by Deema Adada. She is the founder and CEO of Getsett. And she's going to tell us all about Getsett, why she created it, and what problem it's really solving in the market, which is a lot to do with scheduling and understanding things that are happening at the beginning point of your distribution center in your warehouse, and that's the dock doors, where everything needs to be correct coming in and making sure you have no issues there, so it flows all the way through the process. So she's going to tell us all about that and kind of a little bit of her background too, and how she ended up here. So Deema, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, happy to have you on. So why don't you tell us about your background, and then we'll kind of get into how your background kind of led you to where you are starting this company.
Yeah, so I spent my career mostly working at freight brokerages, providing strategic solutions to shippers, and really sitting between the carriers and the shipper perspective. Mm-hmm. So I had an opportunity to be a part of Coyote Logistics and Uber Freight very early on during those stages and helping them scale. Mm-hmm. So I had an opportunity to work with your small shippers all the way up to your large enterprise shippers. So I got to experience, the whole mixed bag.
Right. Interesting. So now, how was Uber Freight? So tell us about that, and how you said you were there early stages. So how was that kind of bringing that on? Because it was a little different for the transportation space, I would say.
Yeah. I actually joined through auto. So the self-driving technology, we were really focused on self-driving truck technology, which was a really fun, exciting space to be a part of. And I was one of the first team members of Uber Freight. And our initial focus was really to drive building up this network of freight through this digital brokerage perspective, but really finding like the corridors in which we could launch the self-driving technology. Right. So I had a really cool experience, getting some of our self-driving partners on board and moving some of our first shipments there. Mm-hmm. And then I really focused on what I had done previously at my role at Coyote Logistics, which was focusing on building our sales team, go-to-market strategy, and bringing on shippers to the platform. So It was different because we really had the ability to leverage the existing Uber platform and some of the processes and technology they had put into place there. But I was still, doing a lot of what I had done previously in terms of, offering shippers solutions in the transportation space.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So where do you think, having that experience, I guess you have a little more knowledge than some of the rest of us that maybe have not been so intimate with Uber Freight and the self-driving aspect. So how far off do you think we are from that being like a real reality that trucks will be driving themselves?
I think it's not that far away. So Too Simple, I just actually posted something about it, had just done a recent haul as well of watermelons. I think the technology is definitely evolving and getting there. Our biggest challenge is actually just regulation crossing state lines today. It is different every state you go. And the initial goal for the self-driving technology is really to cover the long haul miles across highway miles versus inner city miles, where there are more complexities, such as bikers, pedestrians, just unexpected things that occur in inner city roads.
So the new self-driving technology and the way it's evolving, as of recent, we have, made great strides. The challenge that we're still having today is just the regulation across state lines and making it more broadly usable, I guess, where we can actually cross state lines and get more value out of the self-driving technology today. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the regulation is always a huge part, obviously, to make sure that it's safe for everyone, as you mentioned before. The factors of cyclists and pedestrians and all those different things. But I mean, do you think that? Because I saw, I want to say maybe like a year ago, I saw some predictions saying like, at some point, like the highways will have like a dedicated lane just for like self-driving trucks and things like that to move freight. Do you think that's actually a feasible thing, or is that like, we're talking like 2080 or something like that?
I don't know. It's just evolving so quickly. I don't think it will be that far out of a timeline. I don't know if it will necessarily mean that we've got a dedicated lane on the highway, but I do think that we'll get to a point where it's more broadly used. And we may not know as, just a car driving down the highway that we're driving next to a self-driving truck. But I think this technology and even just the speed in which, Tesla has got the self-driving technology, right? Or autopilot of other cars, it's moving so quickly now that I don't anticipate it taking an excessively long time to evolve and get there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And, certainly, the other question too, I mean, is there, because obviously, you've been in the freight business and dealing with transportation side. So, there's always this, I guess, driver shortage. There's always a driver shortage, right? Do you think that this will really help that aspect of the business and address this like never-ending driver shortage?
Yeah, I think you hear a different argument for both sides. One is, self-driving technology may take jobs away from, drivers today.
Right.
There's also the argument that, today drivers are less likely to come back to the workforce because they want to come home at the end of every day. I actually worked with an asset-based trucking company, and it was the most challenging piece. One was, making your appointments and being able to get your next shipment, but it was also getting your driver home at the end of the week. And that was just so important for these drivers. And what this does unlock is actually allow you to just be a local driver picking up from these drop lots and making the deliveries within a given area where you can get home at the end of the day. So there is some attractiveness in, bringing that to a more localized job rather than, having to drive across the country and not making it back at the end of the week. So there's benefit on both sides. I don't think it would eliminate jobs. I think that other jobs will be created as a result of this. And it's just a matter of, how do drivers adapt to these changes? Yeah. And we're seeing much fewer, and we talk about it as like you have a pilot who flies an airplane, and having pilots that support these self-driving trucks as well. I think the job description changes and maybe becomes more attractive than you have to drive cross country in a truck all day, and it's very manual and exhausting and what have you. And it could position this role differently to attract younger talent into the field.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting perspective. And I like the last point there that it would attract the younger talent into the field, because it's something I talked about previously on the podcast too, is it's hard to get the younger generation interested in these types of jobs and roles like driving a truck. So making it more exciting and, self-driving and piloting them, like you mentioned, is more like more fun sounding, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
So definitely interesting stuff, and I'm very interested in the self-driving thing. So I appreciate the input there. So now you spent some time in freight. You're with Coyote, with Uber Freight, and you saw an issue, right? So what was the issue that you saw, and how did you decide to pursue Getsett, which is essentially the solution to this issue, right?
Yeah. I've always sat between shippers and carriers. And there's always been these high expectations to achieve this, 98% on-time performance.
Right. And
oftentimes it was, just very difficult to meet these type of expectations based on the conditions that you're being dealt on either end. So whether it's, the time in which you're actually tendered an order, or appointments that are available, or, delays, etc. There are a lot of things that are out of the control of those coordinating between shipping and transportation. And it didn't seem like anyone was really looking to solve why were we having these points of friction, but more how do we manage, billing or bill back on poor performance and the impact of not getting product there on time. And it just felt like there was just so much opportunity to have an impact to both sides of the equation. How do we actually make this process more efficient and remove these points of friction that are occurring when it comes time from planning a shipment to actually execution? And as I had mentioned, I had actually worked closely with an asset-based provider, and really saw the effects that it had on them when they weren't able to execute as planned, or if things had changed, what it did to their bottom line. Being a broker, you don't really see the true impact it has on the bottom line to a trucking company, but it was a big deal. And it just felt like there was just so much lack of flexibility in the process that I just saw an opportunity to take, what I'd seen both from Uber Freight and evolving technology, but understanding real-time visibility and the ability to make things more dynamic, and applying it to really the warehouse and the dock door. And how do we get a product that sits closer to those who are actually in the point of execution rather than the point of planning? So Getsett's really focused on, supporting shippers and creating a more flexible process to get carriers to schedule and provide information back and forth regarding appointment times, but really we want to build out a more dynamic process. So we're not saying, I'm going to be there on Wednesday at 1 p.m. when reality is a lot of things happen between Monday and Wednesday on both ends that really impact that 1 p.m. time slot. An analogy I love to make is, think about flying in and out of an airport and all that occurs there. You've got different airlines, you've got passengers, you've got the pilots that also are tied to regulation, and your gates. So flights get delayed all the time.
Right.
And a delay of a flight is very quickly coordinated in the sense that, okay, if the flight's going to be delayed, can we take them at this gate? Do we need to go to a different gate? Do we have passengers connecting on another flight? Does the pilot have enough hours to fly the next flight out of here, right? There's so much happening that are multiple parties that are not tied to one another, but impact one another's flights or what have you. In our industry today, we have so many different stakeholders that have a part of moving a product from A to B. And none of these stakeholders truly have this transparency or coordination that we see in airports and flights today. They're all like really operating in these silos and these blind spots, and it's super reactive. Like, my truck didn't show up. I mean, just imagine if the plane just didn't show up to the gate. Like, that's like a big deal. Yeah. I mean, our industry is booming. It's like every minute counts. And we're still operating in the dark. I mean, it just blows my mind that there hasn't been a solution yet to support those type of transactions. So I just think it's interesting when I look at how airports have been operating for as long as I can remember, and how I look at our industry and how antiquated and siloed it is. It's just really shocking.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question, I mean, in the amount of silos that there are, which is a little crazy. And then you liken it to the airport scenario, and what if the plane just didn't show up? I mean, that's it's a huge deal, and it takes a lot of effect downstream as well throughout the process, as you mentioned. So why don't you tell us like a little scenario? Like you mentioned that the appointment is made for Wednesday at 1 p.m., but you're making it on Monday, and a lot of things can happen in between. So if you're using Getsett, how does that situation now change, or how does that work?
Yeah, we are really focused on, moving away from these static appointment times, in the sense that, you schedule this in advance and the expectation is that you're there within 30 minutes or you're considered late and you don't get attention or what have you.
Right.
We view it as, okay, all of these appointments have been scheduled for the day. Let's say it's 20 appointments or however it may be. Mm-hmm. But we know that these 20 orders have to go in or out, prioritization by, whatever next order they may be tied to, et cetera. So the warehouse actually has an understanding of, okay, what are my priorities today? Mm-hmm. And what's actually happening? One, do I have the necessary means to get these out as planned? Do I have all the labor I had planned? Did all the product that we're shipping out today actually arrive in my warehouse and we can ship in full? So there's all these dynamics that happen internally at the warehouse, but then there's also the dynamics of the carrier. Is the driver getting empty this previous location? Is he going to make it in on time? Mm. What other delays may they have come into, driving in with the product, et cetera? So how do we really take a pulse check for kicking off the day and looking at both sides of the equation and understanding, okay, this is what was planned and this is the reality. And then how do we then become more dynamic in how we're executing for the day and communicating that to both parties. So if it's a function of, we're delayed at the facility, don't come at your appointment, come an hour later, and now that driver can go get lunch. Okay. Or if that driver's running behind and you have a driver show up earlier, you can take that driver at that point and not have to wait the 30 minutes for that grace period for that other driver to not show up. Yeah. And keep the ball rolling, right? So you're not wasting time problem solving. Mm-hmm. You're actually focused on the next task at hand, which really allows for products to move more fluidly throughout the warehouse and keeps the drivers moving as well.
Got it. So it sounds like, I guess, Getsett is really the one doing the problem solving for you in that sense, like in the scenarios that you mentioned. So now with the platform, is it something that both now the shipper and the carrier also have to have for them, or is it just something that the shipper can have and then the carrier will get notifications from it? How does that work?
Yeah, so shippers are our customers. We work with them in setting up our product, customizing their calendar, use case, etc. As a carrier, if you are going to be picking up or delivering product into that warehouse, you are required to use our platform to schedule that appointment. And then from there, all communication flows through our system. So whether it's communicated within the platform or it's sent via email, at that point, the user is tied to that order within our network. This can flow up through dispatch and eventually all the way down to the driver use case.
Got it. So is the shipper has it? You said the shipper's your customer, right? So the shipper has Getsett, and then what they send like a link to like a portal to schedule for the carrier, or how does that part work? Just like that?
Yeah, we have a link to the portal.
Oh.
Every carrier has a profile. So that profile is, looking at the view of a carrier, not just the individual user who's selecting the appointment. So we're able to, one, give the carrier visibility. So let's say they have somebody scheduling it, but maybe there's somebody who does the tracking, can also view the order and the appointment and provide updates as well. But once the carrier profile is created, they're just adding new users as they're, scheduling at our facilities. And for the shipper, they're in our product pretty much every day, managing any of those exceptions that may occur.
Got it. Okay. So you mentioned managing an exception. So in the case of, like you said, the shipper is not ready and they want the driver to come an hour later. So how does the driver get that notification? Is that an automated notification that goes out to them, or how does that signal happen?
At this point, it is not quite automated because the shipper just needs to indicate how much further behind they're running.
Okay.
As we continue to understand the behaviors of those shippers, we can start to identify how far they're falling behind based off of when they're checking in drivers and the duration it's taking to get them out the door.
Got it. Okay. And just to mention too, I know that Getsett is fairly new as well, right? So how long have you been working on this?
We recently launched in March.
Right.
I've been working on this for about a year, since actually just before shelter in place. So it feels good to have launched and seeing, the world opening up again.
Right.
But yeah, we've launched about March. We've got our customers on board. We've got our carriers actually working with us as partners as well and developing their carrier portal. So we are, developing pretty quickly here.
Okay, great. And then, so now how has the, I guess, initial response been with your first customers?
So far, so good. I think that they have a lot of ideas, which has been helpful in understanding what the pain points are, what technology is lacking, where the gaps are. So it's been really fun working with them and getting feedback, across the group of shippers to really understand how do we scale this and make it work for, any size shipper and what that workflow looks like for them.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's always good to get feedback from the customers. It's good that you guys have that relationship with them as you're developing this and building it and expanding upon it. So I'm curious, what would you say is the number one benefit for the shipper, and then the number one benefit for the carrier when Getsett is implemented?
Our biggest benefit for our shippers today is actually improving their throughput. So the number of shipments and pallets they can process per day, by improving the number of shipments they can actually take within their given hours of operation. So it's not by adding an additional forklift driver or extra heads at the facility. It's holding that constant and just making them more efficient with what they have. From the carrier perspective, it's actually creating less friction for them and that flexibility for them to be able to schedule, but also update appointments based off of actual ETAs. The other piece that we're focused on is our open API to help with their piece of automation versus having them manually scheduling all the time, data entry, and some of those added touch points in the manual process.
Interesting. Yeah. And I'm sure the carriers definitely love the flexibility. I know you always get that driver that shows up at like 7:00 in the morning for like 12:00 appointment.
Yeah.
And like the gates are not even open yet, and they want to know if they can take the load. So I mean, the flexibility is great, and I think it improves on the communication side as well, I'm sure, because I think so many times there's, like we mentioned, there's all these silos, right? And you reach out to the dispatcher to tell them that you're running late, and then maybe the dispatcher gets behind, they don't contact the driver in time, the driver shows up and you say, oh, we're not ready, we told the dispatcher, and they're like, oh, the dispatcher didn't call me yet, and then the dispatcher calls them when they're already right there standing on the dock.
Exactly.
So I mean, I think,
and we saw that on the inverse too, like when the carrier side talking to the shippers, you may schedule on this portal, but when you need to get a hold of somebody, it becomes so difficult to actually get a hold of somebody that's doing the work at the dock versus, just a customer service representative who has no idea what's happening at the warehouse or dock level. So really just trying to peel that piece back to get them more aligned.
Yeah. I think the communication improvement, I mean, like you mentioned, you're getting better throughput by not adding like more labor or anything like that. It's just organizing it more and making sure that the communication flows through better. And it's really a great thing. So I'm curious too, I saw on the Getsett LinkedIn page, you guys put out like a little paper on dwell time. So curious, can you talk to us about dwell time a little bit? And maybe I guess first start off, what is dwell time for maybe people that are not familiar?
Dwell time is when you have carriers who are idling and waiting outside of the warehouse, even including the time it takes for them to be worked on. But it's the amount of time spent at the location. Typically, carriers get about 2 hours free of time at a warehouse. Dwell time can get tricky. As you mentioned, you get that driver who shows up at 7 a.m. for a noon appointment.
Yep.
Right. So he's actually sitting idling at that warehouse potentially until noon.
Yes.
Whether you had coordinated that to happen or they decided to come on their own accord. So dwell time has quite a bit of impact in both directions. Mm-hmm. I think that, for me, this is an area I focus on because there are other implications that occur with dwell time, and that's, these emissions and gases that are affecting even just like the local community. If you've got a lot of carriers who are dwelling and waiting long periods of time outside the warehouse. So I know, for instance, LA is putting some new proposals in place where they're putting pressure on the shippers to reduce that time that carriers are sitting outside because it's impacting the pollution in the air for them quite a bit.
Absolutely.
So I think that it's not just a function of I showed up at my appointment time and I'm sitting at the facility for longer than a 2-hour period. I think it's actually understanding what's happening within that area. So if you've got a lot of drivers who are showing up between 7 and 9 a.m., but you're not staffed to take more than so many trucks at that time, you're actually creating this additional dwell time outside of your warehouse, even though it's not something that you had intended to have happen.
Right.
But these drivers are sitting outside and waiting. So we are really looking at addressing that in terms of understanding what's happening specifically to those locations. Is it due to the fact that you've got neighboring facilities that are getting unloaded at 5 or 6 a.m. and then you have this big surge of drivers that show up super early? And how do you better adjust for that from a labor perspective to support that? But two, that other piece that we were talking about is that real-time communication between both the facility and the drivers to say, hey, this is what's currently happening. This is the expectation of when you'll be loaded or unloaded. Plan accordingly. So we really want to do both. We want to support, giving the facility the data they need to understand what's happening in the ebbs and flows of the trucks that are arriving at their location. But two, being able to communicate, based off of what's happening on both ends, what's the best, time to be there so that the driver can also go get lunch, go take their rest break somewhere else, and then arrive, get in and get out of that location more quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing because, like you mentioned, and I guess when I was thinking about dwell time, I wasn't even considering the environmental impacts as well. But as you just mentioned there at the end, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to, like we talked about, communicate to that driver that, it's not going to be ready at the time that it was expected or thought to be ready. So they can go somewhere else that's more, appropriate, I guess, like a truck stop or something of that nature, or, take care of something else they need to take care of, whatever the case may be. And, as I'm thinking here too, on the, LTL side as well, like with people making deliveries now, is Getsett able to help them more coordinate their deliveries like more efficiently instead of like, I guess, showing up and they're not ready to take the 2 pallet delivery? Are they able to like get communication and go to a different delivery and then come back to that one at a later time when they're ready?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely opportunity in the LTL. We're hearing more and more about, some of the pain points there. So I think that we will definitely have a product offering to support that.
Okay.
Right now, we're really focused on that full truckload coming in, one pick, one drop kind of environment rather than the LTL, because one of the challenges we see is that typically they're given a window
Right.
So we have, they've always been, I think, thought of secondary in these larger facilities because of these windows and maybe causing some of that product's not ready yet, come back later.
Yeah. Okay.
Environment. So, but yeah, it's definitely an opportunity, I think, for us to bring some value there as well.
Yeah, I think so. Because we had, just to give you an example, I guess we had the other day had somebody come, LTL carrier, they're supposed to drop off 5 pallets, and there was an issue with the payment or something. It was set up wrong on the account, and they were asking for cash on delivery, which we don't do. So we were saying we're going to refuse it, and then the driver was like, well, I'm going to wait and see what happens, if we can fix it, if we can get it sorted out, because I know if I go to my next customer, like, they're not going to take the 5 pallets off for me to get the other one. So, yeah. So, I mean, there's like, all this communication in between that could have happened instead of, him just kind of standing around getting nothing done, essentially, while everybody else was trying to figure it out. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely an opportunity there. But, I think as the Getsett platform is expanding and growing, I mean, I think it's going to do some great things for the industry. And like you said, you're already seeing improvements as well with your customers. So really interesting stuff. And I know you guys just launched in March, but I'm curious, what's the future of Getsett? Does it go beyond the dock doors, or what is really the ultimate vision, I guess, in your eyes as the founder?
Yeah, I see it as going beyond the dock doors. I think that this is, the main entry point in driving that connection between the driver and the carrier and the warehouse level. I gave you that analogy of what airports do today. I think that we see this more broadly in being able to support these stakeholders and being able to manage these exceptions as they're occurring and being able to resolve them in a more quickly fashion. And that could lead to, do we have, enough product on hand? Do we ship short? Do we source from another location? Like, there's so much that goes on that really impacts execution from the time something's planned to the time it really takes to execute. So we're really looking at, understanding some of the exceptions that are occurring from the time that an order is tendered to the time it's executed, and how do we automate some of these exceptions and allow for really freight to move more quickly through the supply chain.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to see how it develops, and, definitely, being able to, I guess, get set at the dock is certainly the place you want to start. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, at the dock doors, I mean, that's really where everything in the process starts, and it needs to be good and done properly in order for it to flow through the whole distribution process from there. So really excited to see what the future of Getsett holds and how you guys keep developing it. And, I'm sure at some point, as we talked about self-driving trucks, we'll be looking at how Getsett schedules self-driving trucks as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. So, Deema, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this show today. How can people find out more information about Getsett?
Yeah, they can check us out at our website, Getsett, Getsett.io. And we are also going to be at the Retail Supply Chain and Logistics Expo in September. So if you guys are there, come check it out.
Okay, great. And we'll put all that information on thenewwarehouse.com as well. So, Deema, thank you so much for your time today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.